You're listening to the Renegade Blitz, the best podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app.
And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz podcast. I'm Polk with Chris Ward and Brandon Walker. Still continuing our off-season chats there as we try to figure out what's going on around the league, what's up with the Steelers. And we're glad to have on Bryan DeArdo, a writer from CBS Sports, repping the A's hat. And Bryan, thanks for coming on the show. And you told us a little bit before we went live that you have a little bit of a personal, touch with the last Super Bowl. Your wife is a Bengals fan. We are sorry for her.
Now, thank you for, first of all, it's a pleasure to be on the show. And I also, I'll send over those sentiments. Yeah, it was crazy. You know, I haven't had a cheering interest in the Super Bowl for a really long time. So to be sitting next to somebody that was so invested, she was so into it, she couldn't even really watch the game. She had a little routine starting, I think, in the Titans game where she would work and listen to Taylor Swift in the other room. And every now and then I'd be like, oh, they had interception, or oh, they had T. Higgins made this play. I just think it's you really go through the 7 stages of grief. You know, it's crazy, the denial, the sadness, the acceptance that it's over. I think largely though their fan base is obviously happy. You know, it does sting, I think, when you've never won a championship and they got so close. And there's so many plays in that game, and as Steeler fans know, fans of anybody. You know, a couple of plays here, your season could have been totally different. And I think, I'll give Zach Taylor credit. You know, he has taken, accepted some blame or has at least acknowledged that there's definitely some second guessing that they're going through, especially that last drive of the game with the running play on 3rd and 1. They kind of just, wasted a second down play. So, yeah, so they're dealing with it, but they're no different than 31 other teams that didn't win the Super Bowl, or 30, I should say.
What stage of grief is she currently in right now? We got to know.
I think acceptance. Acceptance. There was denial for a little bit. And I think, and again, Steeler fans, or if you're fans of any fan base, I mean, I think for Steeler fans, I think for the Super Bowl 30, it wasn't an officiating call. It was the interceptions from Neal, right? Those are we just couldn't get past that. And then in 45, it was probably the Mendenhall fumble that you couldn't get past. I think for Bengal fans, the play it's hard for them to accept is that holding call on Hubbard. And I'm interested honestly, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that as people that probably didn't have a real cheering interest. It is tough to swallow because it seemed like they were not really calling anything the first 58 minutes. Then the last 2 minutes, the officials kind of took over the game. That being said, Higgins probably got away with the face mask on the first touchdown, and the Bengals still did have a chance to tie it with Burrow and with all their offense with a minute and a half left. So I think we're starting to get closer to that acceptance stage.
Yeah. After the game, I saw a lot of Bengals writers or fans. They were upset with the officials, but that was a tough call there on Wilson. But I think, they got a 75-yard touchdown with Higgins when it should have been a face mask penalty on Ramsey there. So I think it does even out. And like you said, they had a chance with Burrow at the end.
They did. And I think the game was in as close. I know it went down to a final drive, but the Bengals only had about 150 passing yards. If you take away that play, they struggled to score all game. The other touchdown was a halfback pass, so they didn't really go down the field and score like they usually do. And as far as the call, yeah, it was a tough call, but it's like Cooper Kupp is just so good and so shifty. You're gonna think he held Cooper Kupp on a linebacker. That's a mismatch all day, every day.
It's a league in which linebackers are expected to cover wide receivers like anything else. And I know here in Pittsburgh, it's like a cardinal sin. Why is Devin Bush covering slot wide receiver name whatever? And that's just the league it is. More times if you're in base, you're having a linebacker cover a slot receiver, and that's just how it goes.
Right. And I think the other thing too, you wonder what kind of game it would have been had Odell stayed healthy, right? It could have been, I don't know if runaway, but, and I'll say this, it seemed almost like the Bengals kind of took their foot off the accelerator. I know their game plan or their play calls were gamely. They went for it on that fourth down after the interception and Joe ran for the first down. They went for it the first drive of the game on fourth down. But they really, if you remember the games against Pittsburgh, and I know it was a different time of the season, a different opponent. They were throwing deep to Higgins. They were taking chances. I think they honestly were. And I think, and again, I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this. I think we're now in the NFL. It's now become like we're all afraid of turning the ball over, right? And you look at the Bengals season. Joe threw a lot of interceptions the first part of the year. Then all of a sudden they reined him in. They asked him to take better care of the ball. That certainly helped them. But I think there's also a negative with that. And again, I'm going to go a little old school here. Remember Cordell Stewart, 97?
Yeah. Oh,
17 interceptions. But look at, but what, 32 total touchdowns? They 3,000 passing yards, which back then was huge. 3-0 in overtime. Sometimes you got to take the turnovers. You got to live with those to get the big plays. And look at the Rams. 2 interceptions by Stafford. But what would you rather have? Would you rather have Stafford's 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions or Burrow's 1 touchdown and no interceptions? And I think sometimes, I think the Bengals at one point should have said, hey, we're okay with you taking some chances. We have the defense that can support you. So I think that maybe going into next year, not just them, but everybody, maybe we should evaluate a little bit more how we look at turnovers. So I think sometimes you do need to take chances.
I'm going to say this. I don't think it was the game plan about them getting scared of Burrow and turn the ball over. They couldn't trust. They just knew at some point they couldn't block Aaron Donald.
Right.
They couldn't block Von Miller. They couldn't block number 50. They couldn't block Robinson. That line of the Los Angeles Rams took over the game, and they had to go conservative.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things you just have to look at with that. That was the thing that everybody went for, that offensive line versus the Rams defensive line. And it really makes you think of a lot of things with the Steelers, especially that magical 6th Super Bowl run with how porous the offensive line was. And just, it really makes you think, well, wow, Ben went superhuman in that game because that Cardinals defense wasn't no slouch. Yes, it was more of a faster, it looked more like today's defense than anything else, but they were still able to get to the quarterback a lot with Dockett and so many other guys that boggle my mind right now. I can't remember it, but
young Calais Campbell,
a very young Calais Campbell,
Antrell Roll, Carlos Dansby. You had
Wilson. Well, he played on the back end. Wilson,
they had
excellent player in his day.
Oh yeah.
So no, I'm with you guys. Did anybody else experience this too? I gained more of an appreciation for Ben after that game because you're just like, man, like that guy delivered in 2 of them and got him to a third. And I know a lot of Steeler fans, no titles the last dozen years or so. But I think if you would ask any Steelers fan in 2004, you're going to get 2 rings during this guy's career, and you're going to get to a third. How many fans do you think would take that? I'd say 8.5. If you put the over/under at 8.5, I think you're going to get the over there, right?
Oh yeah.
No doubt.
When he was in his prime, when he was mobile and he was extending plays, there was no one better in that aspect.
But now let's talk about the future, of course, with the Steelers. And there's been a lot of coaching hires with the Steelers. Of course, the expected hire of Terrell Austin as defensive coordinator. But then on the offensive side of the ball, it's a lot of surprises. They took them both from Carolina, which got a little bit of a stink in the Steelers fan base on Twitter. They hired, really surprising because you didn't hear anything about Ike Hilliard retiring, quitting, getting fired. The wide receiver coach, Freedman Jackson, and then Pat Meyer as OL coach. So I want to first get your thoughts on the new guys, the more recent guys, because, again, Carolina, they had that hot start to begin the season where their offense was actually humming with Darnold at quarterback. But then, of course, the tail end really fell out, starting with the injury to J.C. Horn. on the back end. So what's your thoughts on those two hires, at least offensively first, before we get to Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know too much about the new receivers coach they brought in, but I will say this. I think that the receivers certainly did regress this past year, especially Chase Claypool. And I think for me, a lot of it was the situational mistakes they made. Everybody remembers, was it the Minnesota game where Chase, Minnesota game with the ball misplacement, things of that nature. That I think does go into being a position coach, is working on the other aspects of the game with your players. It isn't just production and route running and things of that nature. And and obviously with James Washington, he never really, whether it was for whatever reason, maybe they didn't give him a fair shake, but for whatever reason, the productivity was never all the way there. You saw flashes. The Chiefs game, I think he made a great play in the playoff game, but Deontay, really good season, Pro Bowl. We saw near the end, he started to. So it could be something as simple as new face in the room, and maybe somebody that can hold the guys a little bit more accountable, that isn't afraid. And that's where coaching is tough, right? You always say Mike Tomlin's a player's coach. I don't buy that in terms of if you're saying that like he's their buddy. He is not. He has their respect, but he still is a tough coach that holds his guys accountable. So I think that maybe this new coach, that's what they're more or less they're looking for, somebody that can challenge these guys a little bit more as professionals. With the offensive line coach, I'm not even totally against that either. Mark Caboli had a great tweet, I think yesterday. Can anybody else without looking name another offensive line coach on any other team? Mike Munchak is like the only one. I mean, I can't name any more, right? So
me either.
And Callahan,
there you go. That's another.
But I knew him because he was the Raiders head coach.
Right.
They're all former head coaches in the league.
Right. Yes, that's the only right. So I think, and he did good things with Curtis Samuel before he went to Washington, and Christian McCaffrey. They did a really good job with him with the creativity. So I think that hire might be more of complimenting Matt Canada. And man, that dude has gotten so much heat after just one season. Some of it's warranted. I mean, and I'm sure you guys have hit on that. And, the biggest thing that I didn't like about it, and I wonder again what you guys think about this. I remember Jerry Dulac tweeted during I think it was the Chiefs game, maybe that the playoff game, that the reason why the Steelers started so slow was that, and then got hot at the end, was that Ben would just scrap the play and start throwing it around. I do think there is some validity to that, but does that mean the candidate is that bad, or does that mean that it just didn't fit what Ben was trying to do and Ben's skill set, right? I think last year was a no-win situation for both guys, and they made the most of it with a 9-7-1 record.
That is a good question, because we talked about it pretty much all year long. Right. I honestly think that Ben didn't respect him the way he needed to be respected, because you're a Hall of Fame quarterback, and you're going to be listening to a rookie offensive coordinator who, in my opinion, was just above mediocre offensive coordinator in college. I know he had I forget.
He did really well at Pitt. He had some issues with Orgeron in LSU. He took over for Durkin after the Maryland fiasco in which a player died in practice. So he has some experience as like a solid level offensive coordinator, LSU aside.
Was it Peterman that he coached in college?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was trying to get.
It was the best scoring offense before this year.
Right. James Conner was there, and they beat Clemson, I think, in Clemson.
Yes, they beat Clemson in Clemson.
Right. So, I don't know if you got some Pitt fans in the house here. How about some old school Tony D? I still think he's the greatest college running back of all time, but I don't. I live in Columbus, so I will never win that argument here.
Maurice Claret.
Do you think Aaron Donald's the best Pitt player, or like player to come out of Pitt now? I saw a lot of people debating that.
Man, I mean that he's on the Mount Rushmore, right? I don't know who the fourth guy would be, but Marino has to, Marino, Dorsett, and him, and I don't know, and Fitzgerald. There you go. I mean, that's your, that's your not Hugh Green. I think Hugh Green actually had a good career. Didn't probably live up to the hype of what he did in college, but
if you mean in terms of like college player and success in the pros, yeah.
Right.
I was gonna say like they love Jimbo Covert here.
Chris Dolman for sure too. Yeah. I mean, people forget how good that. Yeah, Freilich. You know was it Russ Grimm went to Pitt? I think it's not. Should be in the Hall. He is in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah,
Jacoby's not. But, right, Jacoby's not. He is right. Yeah, I think he's in the top 4. You know, and it's funny. I don't know if you guys ever seen this on Pro Football Reference. They have a Hall of Fame monitor. I love it. Yeah. Love that thing. They've got Donald as the 4th best D tackle ever. He's just ahead of Joe Green, and he's behind Randy White, Alan Page. I can't recall the 4th. So he's not the best according to them yet. And that's probably just years put in, right? 8 years. That's probably the thing against him.
Where's Sapp on the list?
He's past those guys. But Donald is a easy Hall of Famer, though. I think the first 8 guys on the list are Hall of Famers.
So they had him ahead of Joe Green? Even
just ahead of Joe Green. Just ahead of Joe
I saw people were talking about that too. I think Ed Bouchette said that he thought Donald's better than Joe Green, which is that's saying a lot. You know,
that's Cardinal sin in this town.
Yeah, in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's.
Let me ask you guys this, because I had this debate a lot with a guy I know. I work with a lot of Giants fans. I don't understand it, but they work with a lot of them. They just love Lawrence Taylor, and I do. I mean, he was a great player. You can't take it away from him, but I do put stock into, and Bill Parcells said it, I think, at one point, you know, that the Giants' lack of maturity and their lack of leadership is one of the reasons why, and it wasn't just him, it was Phil Simms and other guys, that they did not win more titles during the Giants' run. They got 2. You know, Joe Green, they got 4. And that certainly, to me, should move you up a few pegs, because Joe Green was, you know, he was the unquestioned leader of that team. There's only one guy's jersey from that team that was retired. So for you guys, how much stock do you put in championships when you're measuring a guy's career? Because even Bradshaw, you know, the guy called plays in 4 Super Bowls, right? I mean, not just played well, called plays in all 4. So I think that Donald, you know, now that he's got a ring, and I also think with Joe Green too, I mean, if he didn't have that shoulder injury in 75, I don't know. And I think that's the other issue too. Back then, there was such less footage than we have now. There's probably so much footage of Joe Green in 1971 that we've never seen, just because they weren't very good and it was 50 years ago.
And we don't even know how many sacks he had.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's what I'm saying. We don't know.
Right.
There's so much that I'm trying to wean myself off the championship mentality, because I mean, you watch so much NBA and they put so much stock into it for the big player LeBron here. So I'm trying to go all right, in the championship games you made, what was your impact on the game? That would be a better rate. It's all right, when you made it there, if you made it there. Some guys didn't even have the opportunity to do that. When you made it there, what was your impact in the game? Were you able to affect the game in a way in which the outcome, even if it was close, were you one of the reasons why they either A, won the game, or B, had a reason to be in the game? That would be one way that I would look at championships, because that's when everybody's watching. When everybody's watching, you can't necessarily say that, hey, you could look around and go, you know, it's the old saying, if you look in the mirror after the game and say, I did my part, and you didn't look down at the mirror, that's what they should really look in there. I look at that with Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens in that Super Bowl was a huge reason why the Eagles were even in that. He came in with a broken leg. Just like Jack Youngblood for the Rams.
Yeah. It's funny when you mentioned the NBA thing. I actually thought about this when I saw Stafford and Burrow hug afterwards, because it reminded me of Burrow did something that Stafford never did, which was take a small market team to a Super Bowl. And it kind of reminded me of Reggie Miller with the Pacers in 2000 and Allen Iverson in 01, Jason Kidd 02, 03. They didn't win championships, but I think more so in the NBA, there's a respect for getting your team there. I think it's just an added little bonus to your Hall of Fame resume, or a feather on your cap that hey, you know, and that's something that Stafford doesn't have, that Dan Fouts doesn't have, that Phil Rivers doesn't have. And again, you know, I know that championships is how the guys are ultimately measured, but is anybody knocking Joe? Does anybody think less of Joe Burrow today, that because he did fall short? even though he took a team that was 4-11-1 and got him to a Super Bowl. I mean, it's fantastic. And I'm glad that the Bengal fans, I know they had a rally for them today. And I know that Colin Dunlap in Pittsburgh was ripping them for doing that. I don't know how you guys, I don't know.
Ramon Foster as well.
I mean, yeah.
Right.
Hold up. I think you get brownie points for winning, for taking them to the Super Bowl. Because if you went 4-11-1,
Right.
then you take your team to the Super Bowl in year two. In year two of his career. After he got hurt, he's the comeback player of the year. So, and but I was going to ask you a question, Brian, because there's a lot of scuttlebutt going around here now. They weren't talking about this last week. Do you think Matthew Stafford is a Hall of Fame player? And we talked about it on Monday.
Richard Sherman is trying to basically debase most of the 05 quarterback class. So basically Ben Rivers, also Manning. And it's just like he's saying like it's becoming a hall of very good. And I'm like, Ben had a lot of things that went against him in that personal issues, of course, being stuck behind two of the top greats. Matthew Stafford, his best season as a Lion, 5,000 yards throwing, 41 touchdowns, 19 interceptions, but that was a season in which he led the Lions to the playoffs, which is very tough to do up in Detroit.
3 times. But one pro, I know you got to at least have one All-Pro, more than one Pro Bowl.
He got snubbed from the All-Pro for that season.
He did. But you just can't be giving up, because Deion Sanders has said that too. They're giving out Hall of Fame gold jackets like it's candy these days.
I'll say this. I don't think it's as bad as the NBA, but I also think the NBA has different metrics. I think they look like Arvydas Sabonis. No, not. Well, he is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
that's not who I'm thinking about. Who played for the Kings
the
for
Warriors.
a long time?
Was he the Warriors Sabonis, or is that?
Oh, no. He's talking about for
Vlade Divac.
Oh, Vlade. That's another one.
When they put Divac in, I'm like, what? You know, like. But then I thought about his contribution to the game. I thought about what he did with his on the international stage. They beat Alonzo Mourning in USA in '88, and then silver medals in the '92 games. Even though I don't think he was able to play, but regardless, that Yugoslavia team was epic, legendary. There's a great 30 for 30 about it. But it made me think his impact on the game is what got him into the Hall of Fame, not as much as him as a player. Even though he was a good player, made some. Now to your point, Brandon, I don't honestly look at Pro Bowls as much anymore, just because of the fact that like there's a lot of guys like look at LaDainian Tomlinson 2003, 100 receptions, 2,000 all-purpose yards. That he wasn't a Pro Bowler that year. So I remember after that year, I'm like, man, I do think it's important. You need some sort of recognition. You need some sort of Pro Bowl.
You need some accolades.
Right, but like Ben doesn't have a single All-Pro, so I don't really like. I try not to hold it against him. Now, again, I love Pro Football Reference in the Hall of Fame monitor. So here we go. Here's where they have Stafford now. This is updated. So the average point tally for them for a Hall of Fame quarterback is 109. So Ben is a 100. He'll be in. Ben's going to be in. He's close enough. Stafford is down to a 68.4. Now, guys that he is just behind. Russell Wilson. He's behind Russell Wilson. Sonny Jurgensen, who's in the Hall of Fame. Greasy, who's in the Hall of Fame. Warren Moon, who's in the Hall of Fame. Cam Newton, who's not in the Hall of Fame, still playing. Len Dawson, who's in the Hall of Fame. Then Stafford. Stafford's just ahead of Boomer Esiason, not in the Hall of Fame. Won't ever get in the Hall of Fame. Theismann, not in the Hall. I mean, you know that. You know him, Brandon. Very good player, not in the Hall of Fame. Roman Gabriel, Rich Gannon. Now he's ahead of Troy Aikman in the Hall of Fame. So I think looking at that data, looking from what I've seen, looking at who I know that he just played with, looking at what I just saw this season, he's a coin flip to me. He's where like Ben was in like 2014, where he needs to have a few more seasons. Yeah. A few more seasons. Yeah. Like, he needs, because like in 20, it's like if Ben would have retired in 14, I would have been like, yeah, probably, probably like he's probably in the Hall of Fame. But let's get some stats. Let's Let's show. If Stafford can perennially, I don't even think he needs to win another Super Bowl. He can continue to put up good numbers and consistently get the Rams into the playoffs and make noise. I'll put him in. I would say no right now. To me, he's Carson Palmer with the ring.
That's a good comparison right there.
That's a good comparison. Yeah. Both number 1 picks. Both played on a mediocre franchise. I'll just leave it at. Oh, sorry to mediocre franchise.
Took a franchise that wasn't exactly you. Well, the Cardinals did make it to the Super Bowl beforehand, but then they had a drop off after Kurt Warner, but he did take them to their closest berth to a Super Bowl since,
right?
And arguably, and I'm saying this as a secondary Cards fan, should have made it to that Super Bowl and would have made it way more interesting than Carolina did. But that's just me.
Yep. So, Brian, I also want to, speaking of the Hall of Fame, I want to know, do you think Hines Ward will eventually get in the Hall of Fame? Because I saw Santonio Holmes tweeted yesterday that Hines should be in the Hall of Fame. He even said first ballot. So, but as far as, Hall of Fame, do you think Hines will get in there someday?
That's Chris. I mean, Bouchette said that he thought this was going to be the year.
Really?
So
wow.
Kind of surprised.
Honestly, looking at the...
I want to know, how do you think about the Hall of Fame class this year? Because, no offense, great players. Bryant Young.
Right.
Leroy Butler. Baselli.
I'm looking. I'm getting old. I actually wrote this article, but I can't remember who's in it anymore. I got to look it up here.
No, those are the guys who made it this year.
Right.
This is this class.
Right. I'll say this real quick to what you said about it might start to become the Hall of Very Good. I will say this. I do think, and I talked to Mike Haynes, I think a year ago, Raiders, I think he said at one point the standard to get in was higher. And then at some point they started, that's why a lot of guys kind of slipped through the cracks, like Cliff Branch, who I was banging on the door to get in. And I can't wait to meet his family this year at the ceremony. But and Drew Pearson, right? They never got in because they didn't do quite as much as what Starworth and Swan did in the Super Bowls. That's the only reason why those guys got in over the other guys. But then, I'll be totally honest. When Cliff Harris got in last year, I was like, Cliff Harris, really? What did he do in Super Bowls against the Steelers? To your point, Ty, what did he do? He got thrown on the ground by Lambert, right? And actually, at the Hall of Fame, I went to the ceremony. They were showing the highlights of Harris's career, and I actually said to myself, "Oh, they didn't show Lambert." And 2 older gentlemen in front of me turned around and I said, "Oh, be nice." They actually went to college with Cliff Harris, and they were there to celebrate him. He was one of his invited guests, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm an old Steeler fan. I'm just joshing you." So this class, I love Baselli. I think that he was well deserving. He's like the Gale Sayers of offensive linemen, right?
I'll give him that. I'll give you that one.
He was the one that you wanted in there as the first Hall of Fame pick for the Jags. The second is Jimmy Smith, but I don't know about him.
Well, Jimmy Smith falls under the category, and I hate saying this. Have you guys seen the documentary Once Upon a Time in Queens?
I've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
Stop what you're doing and watch it. Listen, this shows how much of a loser I am. I've watched it twice since Friday. It's 4-part series. It is amazing. It's about the 86 Mets. I could have cared less about them my entire life.
Okay.
The Mets. Yes.
You saw it, or you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
It's amazing.
They talked about the 86. The 86 Mets.
Miracle Mets.
They had 2 potential GOATs. And Doc Clinton and Daryl, but them drugs just
right.
Yeah,
right, and that kind of brings me to my point with Jimmy Smith, where unfortunately, because and Keith Hernandez isn't in the Hall of Fame because he did drugs before he got to the Mets, but it got unearthed during his time with the Mets. But so unfortunately, now the NFL does not have as much as the character stuff that baseball does, but I'm happy that Baselli got in. Leroy Butler, I'm lukewarm on. I don't think he was.
That was like, I was like that. I'm great. Sam Mills, I think he's I think he's deserving.
Yes, me too.
The overall defense was
Sam Mills. Yeah, he was a part of the good defenses for the Saints in there. That was kind of one where I was like, is that more like a contributor or like, like a legacy type of thing? A little bit. That was kind of where I was like, okay, if they put Terrell Davis in for peaks, then you're going to have a lot of people that you could put in there for peaks as well. That's where James Harrison, you could potentially put a case in him, because you put Mills in there for peaks. That's where I go, okay.
Not for peak, for longevity, because I'll say more longevity.
You could put longevity in there for Ben if you're putting longevity in there.
I would put him in the longevity category.
I think, and I think, I read Peter King's column and he's a voter. And I think for them, that was like they wanted to salute a guy that busted his hump for so long. And I think that, and he played with a lot of other good linebackers, Pat Swelling and other guys in New Orleans. But I think what put him over Reggie Jackson, right?
He's a Hall of Famer.
Right. I think what put
Vaughn Johnson.
Right. What put Mills over the top, I think, was going to Carolina, age 37, all pro, and they get to an NFC championship. And he was kind of not the first of his time, but he was a newer version, smaller, fast, athletic linebacker. Not a John Bostic, I'm going to get 100 tackles, but not make any huge impact plays. So I think he was a kind of a different cat. No pun intended, played for the Panthers, right? So, Bryant Young, I think, actually could help James Harrison's case, because I know they play different positions, but Young did not get 100 career sacks. I don't know if Young was ever considered like the greatest, player, defensive lineman in his day, but just really, that to me is almost like a Hall of Very Good, in my opinion. Like, I think Young was really
them two, those are suspect. No disrespect to them. If you was going to put them in, you could put a London Fletcher in. If you compare those stats, some of the stats, to other Hall of Fame linebackers that played in his day, you would be surprised how much him and Ray Lewis's stats are similar.
So the Hines Ward question, I think Ward can get in eventually. But I think that there's clearly three guys ahead of him right now that have to go through first. Yeah, Holt has to go. Andre Johnson has to go. Reggie Wayne. Now, if it was me ranking them, the only guy in that group I just said that really should get in ahead of him is Andre Johnson. After that, Ward, I can argue a case that he's better. I think we all can. He can get in before Reggie Wayne, who played next to Marvin Harrison, had Peyton Manning pretty much his whole career, and then had Andrew Luck at the end.
And you could also, and if you're putting that in for Reggie Wayne, you could also do that for Torrey Holt, because he played alongside Isaac Bruce.
Right. And I think
Right. But also, the one thing about Holt,
Hines, real quick, that I don't think people talk about enough is he got 1,000 yards with Cordell, got 1,000 yards with Maddox, got 1,000 yards with Ben. So I think that, and I could be missing somebody there, but like 3 different quarterbacks he got 1,000 yards from, all different types of quarterbacks, different styles of quarterback. And I don't think that's talked about enough.
Yeah, and Holt also got 1,000-yard receivings with Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer, Mark Bolger, fine Richland. So there's a lot of things that go with Holt, and it's like big game and all that stuff. The touchdown in the Super Bowl. There's things that go with each. I would, if I had a ranking in terms of where I would put him in the Hall of Fame, it would be Wayne. I'd put in Hines for that argument you just gave me. Then it would be Holt, and then it would be actually I'm going to switch and put Johnson ahead of him, and then Holt, because Holt had a Hall of Famer throwing for a little bit with it. Johnson, when you really look at what Johnson did, he had absolutely nobody.
Yeah, his best quarterback was Matt Schaub.
Right, but him not getting in this first time, I think the voters were kind of making a statement like, if you're going to make it first ballot as a receiver, there cannot be any cracks in your resume. And I don't know if there's any in Andre's. Maybe at the end he kind of faded a little bit, but I think we need to. It's almost like with baseball now, where like I live in Ohio, close to Cincinnati. They're always saying that Votto's a Reds fan, a future Hall of Famer. I'm like, no, he's not. But the new metrics, how they look at walks, on base percentage, he very well might. I think we need to look at receivers a little differently. we should find a way to keep stats of third down receptions that lead to points. If we looked at that, I think Hines Ward would be a much. How many games did you guys remember watching? And Julian Edelman, 3rd and 6, 8 yards, first down, moving the chains, right?
Yeah. And the blocking factor too. I mean, Hines was the best to ever do it. I think some people overlook that feature, but I think it's important. It helps the run game and everything.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. Now with Harrison, he'll be up for it next year. I think that people need to look at his 5-year peak. His 5-year peak was phenomenal, and I hope that people look at that more so than the fact that he didn't get 100 career sacks. There's a lot of guys with 100 sacks that weren't nearly as impactful as Harrison was.
Right. Yeah, I'm surprised that Marcus Ware didn't make it.
Yeah, definitely.
DeMarcus Ware has 137 and a half career sacks. Didn't make it.
Not to mention that he went to Denver and got a ring there and helped Von Miller out.
I thought he was going to be first ballot.
That was surprising. Yeah. I was like, ugh.
So Bryan, how was it attending the event last year with all those Steelers going into the Hall of Fame?
I'll be honest, like the little kid in me came out when Troy, I think everybody, right? When Troy spoke, I remember I ran from my seat to go get like a Troy shirt. And the first section was like, we're all out. So I ran up to the next one and they're like, we got a few more left. I'm like, I don't care what size I need it. Like when Troy got, when he spoke near the end, I mean, he spoke from the heart as you knew he would. He spoke elegantly. He was great. Cower was really great. It does make you sad that like Donnie didn't get as much love because he's a little bit older of a player. And so there's not as many fans that remember when he played, but like it was really cool to see him make it. I like the fact that he pitched for LC to make it. I mean, I think Randy Russell and LC are the last two guys from the 70s teams that should get in. Along with Dwight White and Ernie Holmes, I don't think they'll ever make it. But, I'm glad that LC gave him a little shout out. But it was cool. And the Hall of Fame game was awesome because whenever there's like Steelers and Cowboys on the same field, it's pretty fantastic. So it's cool. And actually today they just announced the USFL playoffs are going to be held there. So I might be hitching back up the road here on 70 to 77 and covering that.
I don't know if you guys right alongside you.
USFL. I don't know if you guys were excited about it, but I am.
I'm interested.
We're going to cover it.
If we could do a round table, are you really?
I'm gonna do a heavy attempt to cover it.
Nice. If you guys don't mind, like I'd like to do a round table. Like, do you guys? I really want to see Cordell get in the Hall of Honor.
Oh yeah,
definitely. What do you guys think about that?
I think
agree on that.
I would like to see him.
He's the best quarterback that they had between Bradshaw and Ben.
Right.
He contributed to a Super Bowl team. The Steelers don't make it to Super Bowl 30 without Cordell Stewart.
Right.
And he's part of and I think he's part of the reason why Bill Cowher stayed on as long as he did and got that bridge to Ben. Because honestly, I hate to say this, but I kind of question Bill Cowher's Hall of Fame credentials, and I'm gonna tell you why. Lou, you can't. He's like a lamer version of Andy Reid. He can't, because who's all right? Was he as good as? Let's see who his coaches were in the 90s. Was he at the level of Belichick?
No.
Is he as good as Andy Reid?
No.
All time. Do you think he's as good as? I know they didn't entwine. Would you is he a better coach all time than Sean Payton? And I would think he's a Hall of Fame.
They're so it's close, but you're right. Like the level for a coach is definitely it's like you win one Super Bowl, you win like 150 games, like you're a Hall of Famer.
Well, that's Cowher. Cowher kind of started that, right? Cowher was kind of the trailblazer. You win one, it kind of opened up the door. And I think now but in this era, I mean, how many quarterbacks? I mean, Tom Coughlin's another good example, right? He'll probably get in. He won two. He
led off the expansion Jaguars franchise.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. The Super Bowls with the Giants and how they did them, especially that first one, was what took him over the top. But the fact that he had a team competitive in year 2 and making it to a stone's throw of the Super Bowl in their second year is something that you have to look, especially with how hard it was for expansion teams both after the merger was kind of a little bit of a difficult thing. And also with it now, with how the Texans basically just fell out the water from the beginning.
Yeah. Do you think he's a better coach than Mike Shanahan? I ain't talking about Cowher. I ain't get to finish.
Yeah, they're arguing him.
He's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's not. But I was gonna say,
but Shanahan has George Seifert disease, which I like to call it, because when you think of, because Brian, I'm pretty sure you could attest to this. Seifert was a Hall of Fame coach until he went to Carolina.
I do think so, but I also think that them not winning the three-peat in 90 was really held against him. So, and just his overall handling of the end, which is one of the reasons why Walsh left, honestly. He didn't want to deal with, he was done dealing with Young and Montana. That's another good documentary. Not as good as the Mets one. But I watched the Montana one on Peacock. That's really good, too. And pretty much Walsh was like, I can't figure this out. I'm leaving. I'm out. And I think that Seifert kind of got, he got a nice mess, but he got a mess nonetheless, which was eventually you're going to eat the rest of the gravy on the train. But when the train is dry, you got to make tough decisions with Ronnie Lott and with Roger Craig, with free agency coming and all that stuff. But Cowher 2-4 in AFC Championship games and lost all but one at home. And I think, and I think the disgusting one really was, 94 was bad.
Yeah.
01 was I think worse almost in my opinion. I think 97 is the worst because you beat Denver in the regular season badly. They didn't run it with Bettis enough. They put Cordell in really bad spots. And real quick, I was at Ben's last game. And I think that honestly, if you watched it on TV, you had a better appreciation for it. Because when you're in the press box, you see him waving. I'm like, he looked confused to me. He looked, and then I went home and watched it. And I'm like, oh, that was cool. His kids were on the field, and that was nice. But I was in the press box, and there was a younger reporter next to me, and I just said, I always kind of thought Cordell might get a night like this. Obviously not maybe to that level, but might get a little something at the end, And the reporter said, oh, you can't say his name very loud around here. It's not. And I go, I'm going to say it as loud as I want. Cordell is awesome. And I just don't understand the negative backlash about him. I don't get it. And I think that part of being in the Hall of Honor, isn't football entertaining? Isn't it about entertainment? Who was more entertaining than that guy? Go back and watch the 97 Steelers. You won't find a more entertaining season ever.
He was about two decades ahead of his time. And, do you think that those AFC championship games where he played bad, like you mentioned, 97, 2001, do you think where all that, dislike, or do you think that's what's holding him back from the Hall of Honor?
Yeah, I just think that there's a sense of, and I'll be honest, even I just experienced it with Bengal fans. There's a level of jadedness when your team doesn't win. You're like a jaded lover. They tell you that you're going to do all these things together and then it doesn't happen. And then you're like, oh, I thought you promised me this. And I think that a lot of the anger, some of it is rightfully right. You play quarterback, you turn the ball over, you're going to get criticism for sure. But it is a team sport at the end of the day, right? And when you look at the 97 Steelers, Cordell's last throw in that game was a touchdown to Charles Johnson. And the defense had a 3rd and 6. And of course, it was a Hall of Fame to a Hall of Famer, right? Elway to Sharp, first down.
Oh,
give their props.
Right.
You stop them, you give Cordell the ball back, and I like the Steelers' chances. 01, they allowed 2 special teams touchdowns. You can't have that, right? The Steelers' offense outscored. They scored 2 more touchdowns than the Patriots' offense, right?
Brady wasn't even the quarterback for most of the games,
right? And I think that. You go back in Cordell's career, and this is, and I read Cowher's book, the philosophy on the Steelers back then when they lost free agents we're not going to replace them. We're not going to sign those guys, and we're not going to go out and get other big name guys. Their replacements are their draft picks, right? So they lose Yancey Thigpen, they get a Hines Ward. Hines Ward eventually became a great receiver, better than Yancey Thigpen, but during those middle years, guess who was the quarterback? Cordell Stewart, right? Look at all the guys he lost all these years. John Jackson, Yancey Thigpen, Charles Johnson, Andre Hastings, Courtney Hawkins. All these guys gone. You know,
and then plus they lost all those players like Chad Brown, LaVon Kirkland,
right? Willie Williams, right?
William Williams,
And
he came back in 05.
And the kill, right? And the kill shot was Changeli leaving after 97. That was the kill shot. And you see it with these young quarterbacks now when they get different offensive coordinators every year. Cordell was set up for failure after 97. He just was. And I think that he's not ever going to get in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to argue that. But the dude
Ring of Honor at the very least, he deserves that.
And
who's to say he can't become something similar to Randall Cunningham in his prime? I mean, that was the closest equivalent in terms of it. Cunningham, of course, had his best season as more of a pocket passer in Minnesota, but still, those times in Philadelphia, there was a blueprint for a running quarterback that had a cannon at that time. And there's not much to say that the Steelers, if everything went to the way it was, that he could have at very least been a poor man's Randall Cunningham, which in some cases was pretty good.
He was a precursor to Donovan McNabb.
Right.
He was like McNabb before McNabb. If I was gonna he was like the 90s version of Donovan. But Ty, I'm glad you talked about Mike Shanahan suffered from
George Seifert.
So you think, we're gonna get, and this is the set way that we're gonna get into what I really wanted to talk to you about, Brian. So you think Mike Shanahan going to Washington affected his Hall of Fame chances?
Yeah, that was it. And I remember one of the most angry I've ever been watching sports was the Seattle-Washington wildcard game, where you knew RG3 he may have already been kind of hurt going into that game. And he wasn't he? He was already hurt. And I remember thinking they had a lead in that game, and I remember thinking either take him out and put Cousins in, or just get Alfred Morris was a monster that year, or let's just get Alfred Morris going. And Shanahan kept dropping him back, and then eventually tore his knee up at the end of the game, and that was it. And I think that people have held it against him for pretty much ruining RG3. And I'm sure RG3 will hit on that when his book comes out.
That book.
I'm buying that thing.
Yeah,
I'm buying it. But
too. He's a good analyst. He did some pit games, and I really liked him as an analyst.
That fake slide call. Fake slide. I was like, man, this guy's gold. I knew he was gonna be good at this.
Right.
I knew that he was charismatic enough and all that stuff. Rob Parker should go shame himself for what he called him, because as far as I'm concerned,
that was low.
That was beyond low.
It was a low blow, but I think when he comes out, I think he's going to blow the lid off this team, because I don't think it was a Shanahan decision. I think it was a Snyder decision to keep him in.
Possibly. Yeah, very, very possibly. And I think that, and this is what I remember at the start of the show, you mentioned this. I don't know how Dan Snyder is still an NFL owner. Like, he needs to relinquish his team. I mean, that team's in it. I mean, and with all due respect, Brandon, I know you like Washington, right? I mean, that's with all due respect, because like I grew up like 82 Washington team, one of the greatest, the Hogs and John Rick. I mean, there's so much history with that team, even pre-Super Bowl era. That is a historic franchise, and to watch it become what it's become is terrible. And I think like they're a blue blood franchise that should be good, and it's better for the league when they're good. And he needs to relinquish, like, before even the most recent allegations. And this shouldn't be like let's discuss it or let's consider it. Or I think now, like, that's where they are. They're considering. No. It needs to
they got to do it.
It needs to be like fist down, hammer down, like get this done now. Like, as Mike Tomlin.
You ready for my most unpopular opinion about that? You ready for my most unpopular opinion about this entire thing?
Sure.
They'd still be their previous name if it wasn't for that guy.
They would, most definitely.
I would honestly still keep their name if it meant that he was gone. I would be like, that's to the point where it's like, I don't like that guy at all. I think that was a million ways for him to save face.
Yeah.
And I think everybody would be fine with the name if it wasn't him. I know that there's a lot of other things that went into that stuff the timing with it, the entire the campaign against Native American names. But I really believe that it's one thing of that guy. The NFL had to at least show, can we potentially force his hand out? And that was one way to do it.
I would have kept something like Warriors or Warhogs or
Thank you. I wanted to call them the Warhogs.
Red Wolves, anything. I don't know.
Right.
And the name is like a meme itself. If you really shorten the name, ain't that offensive?
Right. And where I really struggle is when I have to write about what they did in the 80s or the 90s. And I wrote Commanders a couple times. I'm like, they weren't the Commanders. This is stupid. But I can't write the other thing. So I just write Washington. And I think if you're writing about them when that was their name, I think it's okay to write it, in my opinion, or to say their name. Joe Gibbs still wears the hat with the logo on it, right? So it's tough. I know it's sensitive. I know I don't want to offend anybody.
I don't want to either.
You just refer to them as the burgundy and gold.
I thought they should have kept.
I would have called them the Braves. Actually, the Braves would have been a better name than the Commanders. I know that the Atlanta Braves have their issues with that, but that's a different thing.
But I would have went with Warriors. I like Warriors because it's similar. It's got that kind of tough mentality.
They could have put the spear on their head and called it a day. I would have been. You want to know something? I'd be like, it's kind of still being tongue in cheek, but it's whatever. It's close enough and it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I just thought of Braves and I was like, land of the free, home of the Braves. Boom.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That sounds good. All right, but let's get to this. How do you feel about all the coaching hires this season, Brian? Because I don't like that Miami. I mean, that press conference was kind of cringe. He looks like the person who works at the law firm at the law firm, the IPTV department at my law firm that I work for. That's what he looks like.
I didn't like him. I didn't like it neither at first glance. I don't know if you guys listen to the Le Batard show, but I'm an addict. I listen every day. And oftentimes I'll fall asleep listening to Greg Cody ramble about something. So, but he was on the Le Batard show and I kind of got more sold on him. He is not the classic button up coach speak, Adam Gase or whatever that we're used to seeing. He is different, but I do, I do like his energy. Obviously, what teams want now, like the thing that Flores, whether or not he did not get along with people or was not a good communicator, regardless, that defense was really good under him. He got that defense to play, and I would be concerned about that with Flores gone now. Are you going to keep that defense where it was? I do really like what McDaniel. I mean, again. You look at what he did. Obviously, it wasn't just him, but you saw what they did in San Francisco with Deebo Samuel. He's already said Jalen Waddle, he's going to do a number of things with him. And with Tua, and I think with Tua, if you are going to get the most out of him, you're seeing it in Cincinnati with Zach Taylor, former quarterbacks coach. I think if you have these young quarterbacks, their chances at success are certainly going to be better if you have more help, if he gets more help. And certainly McDaniel, that's why he's been brought in. He's been brought in to get the most out of Tua and to see, do we have something with this guy or do we not? Because the Steeler fans know with Mason Rudolph, the worst thing in the world is when you don't know if you have a guy or not. We don't know, right? We don't think we do, but we don't know. And so that's why they brought him in. Now, the Lovie Smith hire, I don't really understand. I like Lovie Smith. I think he's did a good job with the Bears and everything, but he was defensive coordinator the year before. So I don't understand why you let a coach go who David Culley, who we all thought did a good job. Like he was given no chance to succeed last year, none. And he got more wins out of that team than most people thought. And they played close in a lot of their losses. So I don't understand that one at all. Minnesota, I think that they, that doesn't make a ton of sense to me because their defense has been what's been backsliding lately, not their offense. But I just think that may have been a situation where the guy's message just got stale in the locker room, which give Tomlin credit. That's never happened with him, right? I mean, so, but yeah, those are just some of my general thoughts on that. I'm actually okay with McDaniel now. I really wasn't at the time, but I think I am now just because I think that Miami wants to see, is Tua the guy or is he not? And this is how they think they're going to find out.
I think the one thing with that, it's just that I think the initial press conference is largely how you win favor in there. And I've gotten to learn about McDaniel before that. And, he's friends with Dan Soder and all that stuff. So I've known some stuff about him. Like, it's a funny guy.
Right.
The Mike Jones stuff. I think that if we're gonna give a W to a team's hire of a coach in the initial press conference, look back to last year with Nick Sirianni. That wasn't a good initial press conference either, and he led the Eagles to the playoffs. They didn't do much there, but they still made it to the playoffs.
All right, number one, we're not going to judge him off of year one. Ben McAdoo made the playoffs in year one, and see how that turned out. And number two,
but he took arguably around the same quarterback situation, maybe slightly worse with Jalen Hurts, slightly because it was a weird situation in which how Hurts became the quarterback in question.
Right.
Tua, we know that he's the guy there, at least for this season.
Well, we're not. Yeah, I wasn't talking about how good of a job he did last year. We're talking about it's a 1-year thing. You got to do it year in, year out. He got fired. McAdoo got fired with halfway through the next season.
Right.
I can't judge it all.
Right, and I think the other thing too is, and I think, and honestly, it's kind of, he did a great job. I don't want to discredit him, but do we really know how great of a coach Zach Taylor is? Because Tobin, their GM, did a phenomenal job this season in free agency, and there's a few moves he made that I think if the Steelers made those same moves, the Steelers only lost that division by a half game, and I know that the Bengals sat their guys week 18, but if they sign Riley Rife, if they re-sign Mike Hilton, if they sign Trey Hendrickson, which I know they would have had to have spent money, are the Steelers an 11-win team with those three guys? Maybe not. I think that they're probably going to get you 10 wins. Now, that's on Duke Tobin. That has nothing to do with Zach Taylor. So I start to wonder, and then even Zach Taylor saying in this Super Bowl, there's calls that he made that weren't good calls, or Callahan, whoever calls their plays. But Taylor's he is an offensive coach, so those plays he's accountable for, right? As the head coach, you're accountable for those play calls. Just like Mike Tomlin is, even though he is a defensive play caller, which I know raised a lot of eyebrows this offseason, he calls the plays. But, I think that, and I think the other thing too is, this is where with McDaniel, we don't know. How is this guy going to keep the locker room going? And I will give Taylor credit there, because you guys remember, right? Geno Atkins didn't buy in. Carlos Dunlap didn't buy in. AJ Green didn't buy in. Well, he may have, but I don't know. Those guys all left, and he had to get the guys to buy in to him. And I kind of thought he was a little nerdy, and I'm like, I don't know if these guys are going to follow him. They did.
Yeah.
The Bengals bought into him, hook, line, and sink. It helps when you've got Joe Burrow. Mike Tomlin, his biggest indictment is that he didn't get more out of the 17-18 Steelers. His biggest credit is what he got out of the 19 and 21 Steelers. Largely, though, Mike Tomlin has never had a team quit on him. And I think that's his biggest strength as a coach. And with McDaniel, is his young, goofy thing, is it going to resonate with Jerome Baker and with Tua? Who knows, right? We'll have to find out.
Yeah, Mike Hilton, that was a big loss. I thought if they could have – I know they were in a tough cap situation. But, the Bengals, like you mentioned, their GM did a great job. And that's why when they lost, I couldn't really say that much because they're way ahead of the Steelers right now. They have their future quarterback. Chase is unbelievable for them. But speaking of the quarterback position, what do you think the Steelers are going to do? Do you think they're going to go make a trade or get a free agent quarterback, veteran guy? Or do you think they're going to draft someone like Malik Willis out of Liberty that everyone's been talking about? Or Kenny Pickett from Pitt has also been mentioned.
I'd love to hear what you guys think too. But I think they want to go all in for quarterback. And I think for Colbert, he kind of wants his walk-off, right? Like Bill Mazeroski, he wants his, or MJ, he wants to leave with his arm in the air. And he's always said, I want to leave them in a better position than when I found them, right? So Colbert wants to leave them in a position where they're going to continue to be competitive. So I for sure think that he wants that feather on his cap that, like, I got him Ben, I got him this guy. And the question, I think it's no secret. I really do think Pickett is their guy. I think that Malik Willis was impressive during the Senior Bowl, and they talked to him, and there is interest reportedly and everything. And I think that's real. It's not fake, not made up. I don't like Sam Howell. I think a lot of people are saying that he might be a guy they take. I'm not a big fan of him. Matt Corral, I'm not a huge fan of him either. I think it's either Pickett or Willis, and I think that they really want Pickett. It doesn't hurt that he went to Pitt for sure. Everybody knows that was Mr. Rooney, the original, Art Rooney. That was his biggest regret, was not drafting him. He was talked out of it. And then Dan Rooney walked in the room in 2004 and was like, "No lineman, we're taking Ben. Like, I'm making the executive decision." And I think you could. The question is, are they going to trade up to do that? They traded up to get Devin Bush 3 years ago, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think if they sit at 20, I don't think Pickett's going to be there. I really don't. I think there's too many other teams that like. Right, I looked at mock drafts today. I saw him going to the Panthers at 6. I saw him going. The furthest back I saw him going anywhere was the Saints at 18. So I think they're going to have to trade up, or you just sit back and take Zion Johnson, and then you pick up Marcus Mariota or Teddy Bridgewater. I don't like that. I wouldn't be totally against it. What is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is you have Mason Rudolph versus Dwayne Haskins versus Marcus Mariota and or Teddy Bridgewater, and you see what happens, right? Or you get Kenny Pickett, and then you roll that way, or Malik Willis. But I think they do want a quarterback. The question is how bad, and we haven't figured that out yet.
Here's the question that I'm going to go into because it actually ties into potentially their decision with that. The GM search is still ongoing with the Steelers, and they've exhausted, in my opinion, all options. They went for the sexy hires like Lewis, Riddick, and of course they look for internal hires with Hunt and Khan. They're trying to get, if they lose Khan, I overheard, they get third-round draft picks as compensation, and I think it's likely the same for Hunt as well. Mm-hmm. So say they decide to go outside the organization, which I don't think they'll do. So that means they're going to lose potentially both of those guys and get a bevy of third-round picks. Probably what they should have got if they would have let Juju go last year as well. They have a ton of third-round picks. Philadelphia, you mentioned Pickett at 18. Philadelphia is picking back-to-back at 15 and 16. Is that the trade-up opportunity for them if that were to happen?
Yeah, I think so. And it makes sense because they're not in the division, so there wouldn't be this turmoil there. So I for sure could see that. And I do think that the Steelers, if you're not going to get a quarterback, I mean, you could with those picks, but I also think that, they obviously have to address their line, right? And I think you need a big nasty. And from, what I'm seeing out of Zion Johnson, he's a big nasty. He also in college played left tackle and guard. He's more of a guard, but he's really good in pass protection. So, Najee Harris might not want to hear that, but whoever is to be quarterback wants to hear that. So I think my personal opinion is I think they're going to keep Khan and Hunt. I think they're going to share the title. I know Bouchette's reported that. I think that's what's going to happen. I think they're doing their due diligence right now, doing other interviews, and they're also letting those, I don't think either of them have really ever done the expansive interview process. So I think the Steelers are letting them do that too. Hey, go see if, what that experience is like. And if you think we're still the right fit and we think you're still the right fit, we'll reconvene. But I think it will be those two. Because I think if it wasn't going to be somebody in-house, I think they would have let Colbert go a lot earlier and started the search process more. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're going to keep Colbert and not have somebody close by that's going to be an heir apparent. Right. And to be like, Hunt's had chances to go. Khan's had chances to go. Not as much as now, but they have. And I think that it makes so much sense for the Steelers to have those guys share the title. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think they want to keep it in-house, and I think they want to continue to lean on what Colbert has taught them and what they've learned from him.
You guys got anything else to add?
I just want to touch back on the Cordell thing. I know the Players Tribune article came out last year. Man, he just got a rough deal. Like, he was treated awful in Pittsburgh. I was wondering, did you ever get a chance to interview Cordell?
No, that's something that I'm still trying to do. I'm trying to. He's hard to get a hold of, unfortunately. So at least for me, he is. I'm gonna keep trying. So he's still getting rap from that, and this time from like exes, from what I've read, and it's just like, dude just had this totally over his neck for years, which I don't get.
It was foul when he played, because I know the rumors too.
No, it's still continuing. Like, one of his exes did something. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah, she was the one from Real Housewives of whatever. I'm more of a Love and Hip Hop guy, but I don't
Atlanta, really.
But on the point. But
yeah, I haven't talked to him yet. I want to, and I to me, there's some reason why he's not in the Hall of Honor yet. I know it still is only 5 years old, 6 years old, the Hall of Honor, and I knew he wasn't going to get in right away. I mean, that was, but even during Bettis' Hall of Fame speech, he didn't mention Cordell at all, and he was like, my quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. When I think of Bettis, I think of him in Slash. That's what I think of, and again, it's so funny. My favorite Steelers team to this day is still 97, just because that's the team that just was. I mean, it was like I told my wife at some point with this Bengals team, I told her, I go, you're gonna remember this team forever, because this is the team that, like, every time you thought they were done, they just surprised you in a good way, right, until the end. But that team was, in the way Cordell played, he was so dynamic, and that's where, to me, it's not all about. I always thought the team that won the championship would be my favorite team. That's not always the case. It's the team that you enjoyed watching the most, right? I mean, Dan Fouts said that in a documentary about the 81 Chargers, right? Like, their legacy is they were a fun team. They changed football. So, to me, I do think that, we shouldn't forget about the 95 Steelers or the 2010 Steelers. I mean, they're among the 8 best teams in franchise history, right? Even the last 10 years of Steeler football, like, you shouldn't be ashamed to say, even this past year, like, how many people were excited to see Ben go out that way? I know it wasn't like a Super Bowl, but he left on his own terms. And I think we all knew it was over. He couldn't move anymore, really, but he had enough. He had enough to get him to the playoffs, right? And I think that was a great way for him to go out. It'll be interesting to see, though, what they do with receiver. I don't know if I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Juju's gone. I don't know if you guys think Juju, if you want him back. I'm not really sure.
I think he wants out. I don't know if he wants. I don't know if he wants to play with Rudolph. That's just not like. That's just my opinion. He had the report the other week about saying that he's likely headed to a free agent. They made some comments about the Steelers' wooden locker rooms and stuff.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? I think Jay Austin might stay.
Who?
For Rudolph, I think since Ben's gone, they never clicked.
Yeah.
Because ever since he threw him under the bus after that Denver game in 2018, I was going to say,
right.
Yeah, it ain't never been. His most productive time was in 19 when Mason was the quarterback.
Right, it's right, and they had the college connection. Right. And
they have the college. He might.
I don't know. I think with that coaching staff, I don't know. He seemed unhappy. There was even reports before the season that he wanted out. But you're right about Ben. I don't think him and Washington
never clicked at all.
But what do you guys think of him and Mason never having a relationship? What do you guys think about that? That was weird to me.
Weird, yeah. I wrote a quick article about that. How, he didn't talk to him when he had COVID. When Ben, and then like even in the middle of the week they didn't talk, and Rudolph didn't say anything on social media when like all the other quarterbacks that played with Roethlisberger did. I mean, he could have said something privately, but that definitely was weird though.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's I honestly think that's the way it is, because when even the Montana documentary, which he must not be that popular anymore, because like that was really revealing, and he had he cried during it, just 30 years later, almost, the pain of how it ended in San Francisco. You can tell there's still some bad feelings between him and Steve Young, who I give Young credit for. Young spoke on the show, on the documentary. Right. Favre and Rodgers in love. They all had friction, whatever. So I just think that might just be the nature of it.
But like a territorial thing or something. They guys behind him and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
I never got the entire thing, because think about it. We had Chris Carter on here plenty of times, and he opened up the possibility of Lamar Jackson potentially being in a Steelers uniform in that same draft instead of Mason Rudolph. And I'm like, I've never really felt that Mason Rudolph was necessarily a threat. Even when he initially got drafted, I had high hopes for him, but I'm just like, when I looked at him and then I looked at Lamar Jackson, who, yes, janky throwing motion aside, that guy still won an MVP and still threw a ton of touchdowns out there. I think he's more talented, and I'm like, if Ben had an issue with them wasting a 3rd round pick, Lamar Jackson, 1st round pick, Jordan Love, 1st round pick, I think he'd have more of an issue with that. That I never got because it never Mason Rudolph. What he lit it up at Heinz Field for Oklahoma State in the air raid.
Yeah.
Me, you, Chris, and Brandon. If we go out there and play in the air raid in an air raid offense, we're putting up 3 touchdowns. So I there's a level where I went. I never got why he hated that guy before everything went down with him, where it's kind of like the in vogue thing not to like him.
And I'm not like, let's just, I don't think Mason's a Hall of Famer, but like, he might not be bad. He might be. I mean, we saw with Garoppolo, right? Like he got him right there twice, in 19 and this year. And I think that Mason could do that if you have a good enough team. I think he could do that. So to me,
he's
that's
a one-read quarterback. He is a one-read quarterback. He's a one-read quarterback.
Yeah, and you wonder if he gets more, if he's the guy. And Ben even said it late in the year, and I don't know if it was just Ben just giving coach speak, but he did say that him being gone might be the best thing for Mason because then it might change everything in terms of preparation. He gets all the reps now, so now you get all that extra practice. To your point, though. Yeah, he can't just throw to the first guy he sees. You got to be able to scan the field. You got to be able to look around. We all play Madden, right? How often do you say going in, I'm going to throw to the tight end, then you see your receiver streaking downfield, right? You got to go through your progressions, even if you might get sacked. So, yeah, I don't know. Because to me, the worst case scenario is Mason plays this year. He's really bad. The team nosedives, and you get a chance to draft a quarterback next year, unless you really believe that the guy is in this year's draft. And if you really, and I think, and again, I'm not a quarterback evaluator, but like, I like what I saw from Pickett. I like that he's mobile enough. The Steelers, we all know it here. They don't need Lamar Jackson, but they need somebody that can move. You need a quarterback that can move. Joe Burrow, right? The AFC Championship game ran around. The Super Bowl had a 4th down run. You need a guy that can do that. Ben couldn't do that this past year, and Pickett can. They made a rule against him, right? Because of that thing he did in the ACC game. So, I think that and Jackson, I think obviously would be fine too. But yeah, another thing we haven't touched on is, they do need another tight end because it doesn't look like Ebron's going to come back. I know he tweeted today that. You don't think?
I thought the tight end room as it stood after Ebron got hurt was pretty good.
You think him and Radar and Gentry is good?
Yeah,
to go?
I thought. That little tight end screen stuff that they were doing there, it got Gentry out in space. Right. Radar looked good. I felt that the new tight ends coach breathed more life in the position from outside tight end 1 for the first time in a while. Right. I think James Daniels. He came in with Ben in 2004. It was the first time where I was sitting there. It's like, wow, we actually have a tight end room here in Pittsburgh. You could see development. You know what I mean?
True. That's true. Right. Yeah. And maybe they get somebody for a body, but yeah, for sure.
Maybe a body to challenge for tight end 3.
Move is going to be.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, I think Freiermuth is going to be an all-pro.
Yeah, my concern is his head. My concern is his noggin. Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. If he could stop, if he could get his concussions situated, I don't know how to say that,
like
but I think he'll be an all-pro.
Now, a receiver that I've looked at in free agency, and when you look at the free agency this year, linemen are okay, and there's a few really high priced ones if the Steelers want to go that route. Other than that, you could get like a Morgan Moses maybe, but Cam Robinson and Brandon Scherf were going to be there, but those are high priced guys. Receiver, DJ Shark I think is going to be available, and I know that he's a former Pro Bowler, 1,000-yard guy, has never had a quarterback really, 6'4", still young. I think it depends on if Juju's gone as we all assume. I think Shark would be a great addition to the offense. And I know I'm sure they'll draft a receiver. I know it's not the top of their priority list. And in terms of in-house free agents, I would keep Joe Hayden. There aren't a lot of other great cornerbacks I think that are going to be available, like J.C. Jackson potentially. But, to me, I would now defensive lineman. If you can get Larry Ogunjobi from Cincinnati, I think that would be a great signing if you can get him. It'll be interesting to see how much the Steelers want to spend in free agency this year. Because, again, we saw it last year where the Bengals swung big with Hendrickson and with Mike Hilton, and then even lesser with Wiley Rife. So it'll be interesting to see if the Steelers swing big or they get the more conservative signings like Alu, who did turn out good. But I mean, I don't think Tuitt's going to play again. I don't think so. Right. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but there's been no indication that he's going to play again. So they're going to have to find somebody to replace him.
And there was a report that he put his house up for sale in Pittsburgh. And that doesn't mean he's done in the Steelers, but I don't know what's going to happen either. But they'll have to plan accordingly if he does plan to retire.
Right. Yeah. I mean and again, like that's something that they couldn't predict. Right. I mean, injuries happen. We all know that's going to happen. But when they lost Alu and when they lost Tuitt, it was just like, man, this is going to be a tough season because
run just got slashed.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it was the fact they went 9-7-1 last year was honestly kind of a miracle. It really was.
I was shocked by it. Yeah, I mean, a couple, Ben, I think had like 7 game-winning drives and stuff. They turned it on in the fourth quarter. I mean, speaking of the run defense, do you think Devin Bush? Do you think he will? The ACL injury. Do you think he'll pick things up, or do you think he's like on the verge of being a bust? I think with some Steeler fans and everything.
Yeah. I'm sure you guys. I know you guys watched it too. I think at the end of the season he played considerably better. He couldn't have played much worse. I mean, there were games where he just drifted, right? It was like literally they were playing with the man down like soccer, right? It was just, he would just run around like by the ball carrier, and then late in the year he started to get better. So, and I do think for everybody, I just think now we're all accustomed to seeing torn ACL, 6 months back on the field, he'll be fine. I think it takes everybody a different phase, right? Even Joe Burrow, like he actually said, I think this past week or last week, the Steelers game, the first time they played when he actually made a play with his legs for the touchdown was the first time he actually said, like, I'm back. I feel now like myself. And it was almost a year. So I think that, mentally, I don't think Devin was back and physically he wasn't back. So yeah, I think this year you'll see a much better Devin Bush. And I think they do like Ulysses Gilbert and they like the guys behind him that did play at times when he struggled. So I think linebacker, they'll probably want to add to the room, especially, we don't know what they're going to do with Schobert, but, I do think that they're somewhat, comfortable with their inside linebacker play. And I mean, and I think everybody liked what Highsmith did, right? I mean, yeah, there were games where he didn't do a lot, but I thought overall he did great, replacing Bud Dupree. And he had more sacks than Dupree did this year because he was hurt. So, there's a lot of, they're in the division with the AFC champions, and they've got Baltimore. If they're healthy, we all expect them to be right back to 10 wins, right? Or competing for 10 wins. I think Cleveland's a team that they need to look in the mirror, because they don't know what they're going to do with the quarterback position. And, their receivers all of a sudden aren't good at all. And they got one decent receiver. So all of a sudden Cleveland went from having Odell and having, Jarvis, and now they're down to like one receiver. So I think Cleveland is the team that I'm looking at in our division. And I'm like, that's the one team I would not want to be, even though they have a great running game that they don't use enough.
Yeah, and you're a Ohio State guy, so I know that Devin Bush, when he was coming out, the game he played with Ohio State wasn't that very impressive. I remember everyone was talking about it. So being like you watch Big Ten football, did you think he was a 10th overall type of pick when the Steelers selected him, or did you think he was a little bit overrated?
Honestly, he's kind of what we've seen in his career now, where there's periods of times where he's like a turnover magnet and he's just around the ball. And then there's games where he's nothing. He's non-existent. To me, he was not consistent enough to merit a first round pick. To me, you've got to have a certain level of consistency, so if you're a running back, you're around 100 yards a game, every game in college, and you don't have many games where you just really have a setback. And I think for Devin, there were a lot of games where he'd have 10, 11 tackles with a forced fumble and 3 tackles for losses. And then games where he had 3 tackles. And you're looking at it, and it wasn't like the team he played was a lot harder. He just had lapses. And it's almost like there's games where he's just not mentally there. And so I don't know if that's a focus thing, it's a coaching thing, whatever it is. I just thought that was a little bit of a reach. But I think the Steelers drafted for need, obviously, that year. They didn't draft a linebacker in 18, which I think really killed them. I don't know about you guys. I could not believe they had taken a linebacker in 18. I couldn't believe it. That's the year they took Terrell Edmonds. I couldn't believe it.
His brother, they could have traded up. His brother was a first-round pick who's killing it in Buffalo.
Right. I just remember thinking, you lost Shazier the minute, and the thing that's amazing, I think from 15 to 18, the Steelers were the best team in the AFC, and they didn't even get to a Super Bowl. 15, it was all the injuries they had. They were down to like Isaac Redmond in the fast running back they had in the
Fitzgerald too fun.
Right.
That's the guy who fumbled in the Denver game.
Right. And then 16, Le'Veon got hurt, his groin, and then it nosedived, right? And then 17, when Shazier got hurt, that was it. And then Jesse James game happened, and then they lose home field advantage. And instead of playing Tennessee in the second round, they have to play Jacksonville. We all know what happened. Yeah. And then 18, they never replaced Ryan. And then you had all the Le'Veon distractions and Jim Wexler, who I worked with that year, who was in the locker room when you used to be able to be in the locker room. He told me that he didn't really think that there was the outside noise didn't get to them until Antonio at the end, week 17. I honestly don't agree. And I have the utmost respect for Jim. I think that team it was drama all year long with them. And I think that they couldn't get out of their own way. And I think it affected them all year long. And I think it got him at the end. And then 19, Ben got hurt, and that year was a wash. But, it is amazing. Then you see Cincinnati this year just sprint to the Super Bowl. And you're like, the Steelers in 16 were probably better than them, right? Right? Or 17? But
16, yeah, they were better.
I think there was a lot of things that just went wrong.
Their defense was still shaky, though.
Right. They were still getting that
shaky defense on defensive.
2017 was the year, Shazier got injured. That was the year they were going to win another one.
I think they still probably could have used a better safety overall, because I still will always remember Rob Gronkowski just jump balling over Sean Davis. And this dude has the audacity to look at him, pantomime laughing, spike it. And I just remember watching that game in a bar. And I was just like, how can you allow someone to literally just dunk all over you? Because I don't like to be that man. If I was on that field, I would have cold cocked him. But I would look at him and go, you cannot do that to me at all.
And it is crazy, right? Because Brady ends up with 7 rings. But there was a point in time for a while that Brady had 3 and Ben had 2. Brady went to like 5 Super Bowls. Ben had been to 3. So it was. And I honestly, I'm sure you guys all remember, on Tuesdays, Ben would do his show. I mean, that headlines for the rest of the day, right? Then Tom would talk and he would respond to what Ben said. But like, I remember a lot of times before they would play the Patriots, they would ask Ben about Brady, and he would be like, yeah, he's great. But you could tell that Ben was kind of miffed. Like, hey, I'm Ben Roethlisberger here. Why am I talking about Tom Brady? And some of that is valid, right? Like, Ben was great in his own right, but just in those moments, Brady and it wasn't even like it was rocket science, right? As you said, Ty, Rob Gronkowski's open. There was a point in the game where you're like, he's going to throw to Gronk every freaking play because it's a mismatch. He knows it. We know it. They know it. It doesn't matter. And Brady, and that's where I almost think like that's part of the Brady mystique or the Brady greatness that we don't talk about enough is just like he just did
it was common sense.
Right. He just had common sense.
It just felt at the end. It was like, he's going to throw it to you and your safety or linebacker better be ready.
Right. It was like that AFC Championship game. The Steelers come out. He just starts throwing quick zips to Chris Hogan because William Gay is sitting back and our corners are sitting back. And you're like, why aren't we pressing? I felt like in 16, they were scared. I really felt like they were scared. Yeah. They were in New England. It was at night. And it was almost like they were like, instead of watching a horror movie in the movie theater, they were watching it in real time. And it was like, oh, Freddy Krueger's right here. And it was just like, it's almost like a guy. Like, I think Brady's mystique almost won that game. They were just like starstruck or something.
No, yeah. Them talking and running their mouths and messing around in the locker room after the Chiefs game did not help that cause either.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The whole the Facebook Live thing, which like honestly,
Yeah.
I remember going to bed and my boss messaged me and was like, "Hey, FYI, like AB's kind of going crazy in the Facebook." And I'm like, "All right, I'll figure it out in the morning." And I wake up and like it was just like everybody's like, "Oh my God!" Like
I remember seeing it live because I remember watching it live and going like, "Wait, who is that yelling? It's Tomlin! Oh God, no!"
Yeah, and I think. I mean, this could be an entire episode, right? We could do Chronicles of the Teen Steelers. We could go over everything. When did AB cross? Like, when did he just go into that other place? And I think it was
Vontez Burfict.
Probably.
Everybody says that, but he was always doing it. He was always doing things like that.
It really went left after that.
Hey, money too.
After
Getting more money can do a lot of things too.
It went left. Because that season he started that first game of the season against the then Washington Redskins. He burnt Rashard Reeland. And he started twerking on the in the end zone. I'm like, bro, it sounds like it's.
Do you know when I think when it really fell apart? I think it was. Do you remember when he got his extension in 2017 and? And I remember thinking like, all right. And I remember he came back in 2017. We all agree that his best season was, I think his freakish AB. If like, show me freakish athletic AB, I'll say 15 when 1,800 yards. Yeah. But if you say, give me professional receiver AB, I'll give you 17. And he kind of wore I am the new face of the franchise. You know, you remember, I think the height of AB's career is when he gets hurt against New England. And they're chanting his name when he's leaving, and it's a goosebump moment. And I think after that season, I think all the writers need something to write about. Then all of a sudden they're writing Antonio's not coming to OTAs. He's not coming to minicamp or this or that. And I think he got tired of it. But I think it got to a level with him where he couldn't handle the criticism anymore. He couldn't handle the negativity anymore. And then he saw that. And the thing that I don't know if AB ever understood it, but like Ben also got criticized for not going to OTAs, not going to stuff too. So it wasn't just him. But I think he thought, hey, look how I produce on the field. Look how I've stayed. I've tried to steer clear of controversy and everything and try to be a leader. And I played it. I think for him, it was like I played hurt against Jacksonville in a game that Michael Irvin said was the greatest he'd ever seen a receiver play, the Jaguar playoff game. Right. So the dude's like, dude, I'm playing on one leg for this city, and you can't give me more respect for this. I think a lot of what he said was and is warranted, but the way he's gone about handling it isn't the best.
Yeah.
My feeling is this. For Ben, a lot of the national narrative, like whenever I hear Chris Carter talk about Ben and saying like he's not a team player, he's not that, I think back to the radio show and how everything went down. Yeah. And then when I think of like where it went wrong with AB, I had to miss a lot of Sundays because of the job that I worked at the time, where it was like the best time for me to work was that Sunday. So there was a lot of games that I missed. But I remember seeing AB like throw that the Gatorade cooler in Baltimore, and I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. Right. That's where I basically was like, all right, it confirmed in my head. I always knew that he was like a little bit of a different type of cat, but that's where I was like, it's like his anger regularly started showing, and that's where I always kind of like kept that opinion, like where things really went wrong with him. Yes, it was after the Burfict hit, but I knew that I always knew that whenever I'd seen him speak, there was just something different with him, like before that.
I'm getting a charger, not to give you guys a view of my home here, but
yeah,
I'm going to try to silhouette here a little bit.
But we kind of gone hard for over 90 minutes, man. Guys, is there any last things you want to talk about before we go?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah,
because my phone's about to die myself.
Yeah. Guys, it was an absolute pleasure to be on the show, as I now made it to my living room here. And it was a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it. Would love to do it again whenever you guys have time or need a fourth spot. Be more than happy to step in. So it was really nice to meet some of you guys that I hadn't met before. And Chris, I know we've communicated quite a bit on social media, so it was good to finally speak to you in person. So Yeah, it was a lot of fun, guys, and maybe we'll start the Cordell for the Hall of Honor.
Yeah.
Whatever. We'll start the campaign.
We'll start a campaign right now. And that's Bryan DeArdo of CBS Sports. And thank you so much for the conversation, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Great to talk to you guys as well.
I'll see you, Brian. Take care.
Yeah, you too, guys. See ya.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to this marathon episode of the Renegade Blitz. That's Chris Ward. That's Brandon Walker. You've been listening to us, and thank you so much for your support as we're nearing 100 episodes, guys. Can't believe it.
100.
Wow,
That is a accomplishment.
Time flies.
We'll get
man.
that
Time
before the
flies.
draft, though.
We'll try to hit it before the draft, or at the very least with the USFL. Oh wait, that's probably around the same time. Doesn't matter. But regardless, guys, thank you so much for your report. Thank you so much for your guys' work, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, at @RBlitzPod, and at Blitz Videos. Read articles on renegadeblitz.com. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. The Renegade Blitz podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and wherever else you can listen to podcasts.